You know what? Small plays. I'm going to start doing small plays because I can get a cast of 2 on really quickly. Hello, everybody, and please welcome the cast and creative team of Othello. Woohoo! Thank you all for joining us on these lands of the Yagara and the Turrbal people for a truly original meeting of ancient storytelling traditions with Shakespeare in a new adaptation, recreation, invention by the extraordinary Jason Clarwine and Jimmy Barney. Woohoo! Now, I'm going to cast your minds back to 2019. This was announced as part of the 2020 season. Everybody was looking forward to it. I stood upstairs in the function room and at the top of 2020 and saw the design presentation for this play, and I can honestly say my mind was blown, not only by what these two artists were putting forward as a revisioning of Shakespeare's Othello, but I was also blown away by the fact that I knew nothing about the history of World War II up in the Torres Strait. I felt kind of ashamed of my lack of education in that space, but I was really, truly looking forward to this story meeting Brisbane. Then COVID. And one of the worst things I had to do was pick up the phone, well actually I think it was at Zoom at that point, and talk to all of these artists and say, I'm terribly sorry, we're not going to be able to put this show on, but I promise that we are not letting go of this play. Now, it's taken nearly 3 years for the play to finally find its way to the Bill Brown Theatre, but I have to start off the conversation tonight with a huge thank you to this team of artists, because amazingly, we have the entire original team. They have stuck with this story, yeah. And that has not happened in the country. As things have shifted around and moved, actors have gone on to other shows, there have been clashes, but this whole group of extraordinary artists has stayed dedicated to getting this show on stage for us, and thank you, all of you. I don't know what it's cost you to stay connected. I don't know what it's cost you as a group of artists to keep investing in this story, but I know that you've carried this story in your body now for close on 3 years. We did have rehearsals last year, and the show went on up in Cairns. One of the silver linings was the ability to take this to a Cairns audience first, and I was lucky. I was one of the lucky audience that got to see it, meet the audience up there, and see I don't know quite how we managed to jam all of those people into the Bulmbajar space, but that was an extraordinary telling of the story up north, as it should have been, the place to start it. But I want to hand over to Jason and Jimmy and have them introduce this beautiful team that will be bringing you the performance of Othello with the first preview on Saturday night. Woohoo! Jason, Jimmy.
Hello, everyone. This came about because Jimmy and I were doing a show in this theatre, and we were in the dressing room, and we'd already made a show together called My Name is Jimmy, which some of you may have seen in this theatre. About the Barney family, and it's not just about Jimmy, because you would have seen Conwell and Richard in that show, and this is their other brother Gabe's, who wasn't in that show, but now he's in this one. So we just keep adding brothers as we keep going. And I said to Jimmy, "Oh, well, what do you want to do in a classic work? Because we're not our artistic partnership's not just about making." Sort of traditional Indigenous theatre, or whatever you want to call that. And Jimmy said Othello, which was quite surprising, because a lot of people don't want to touch Othello because of its racist overtones, etc. And so we started talking about it, but I've always wanted to do Othello, and it would be the first time in the history of this company, in the 50-something years, that someone has produced Othello. It's never been done at the company. So that tells you how difficult... Oh, great, good. Fan. It tells you how difficult the piece is and what is required of the actors that you're seeing in front of you here. And it'll be the first time in the world that a Torres Strait Islander has played the role. And Jimmy, we were talking, how did we, what was the conversation? Like, do you want to just explain the Torres Strait Light Infantry and how we'll talk about time and place?
Yeah, so in World War II, over 800 Torres Strait Islanders, Torres Strait Islander men, had to sign up for the Torres Strait Islander Light Infantry, or the Australian Army, up in the Torres Straits. If you don't know what the Torres Straits, that's between Papua New Guinea and the tip, and that's when the Japanese come up to the Kokoda, and yeah, it's basically a really big. Every single Torres Strait Islander you know in this country has a relation, you know, a grandfather or great grandfather that signed up, and you know, I guess when Jason asked when do we want to set it, and he started, I'm like, can you just have a yarn about the story, about the original story? So he started talking about, you know, how when they went up to Cyprus, yep, and how the captain would travel from one place to another because of a sign, because of you know, the war was happening at that area. And straight away I was like, oh my God, that sounds like when the Japanese came over to Kokoda up in Papua New Guinea, close to our area, and then we started, hey, World War II, oh wow, okay. But one important thing that Jason said with Shakespeare is that you need to have a time and place, or place and a time. When you set the geography and also the time, what it does is it actually gives you rules, you know, of that area. And when you say place, I kept it close to myself within my cultural court system, my law, in a sense where there's rules and guidelines within my law that you don't have to recreate anything. So there was this foundation that was set, and we sort of bounced off that and tried to, you know, connect the original story of Shakespeare into sort of our version that we have now. And it was exciting because we started to freak out a little bit just to see how connected it was in this amazing writing from over on the other side of the world, talking about elements, talking about spirits, talking about wind, you know, high seas, thunder, that, oh my God, we have it in our language. Like, that's what we live off. We live off the weather. We live off the, you know, the time of a season, and it's all in our songs and dances. So, yeah, that was a little bit spin out, and we were like, okay, I think we've got something here. Let's just continue on, and yeah.
So there the two of you are with a great idea and a lot of excitement. Could you introduce us to the people that you convinced to go on this great journey with you?
Yes, you go.
I'm Andrew Buchanan and I'm playing Desdemona. I'm playing Iago.
I'm Eugene Gilfetter and I played Desdemona. I play Brabantio, who's Desdemona's father.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Jimmy, play Othello, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Connie and play one of the soldiers. Yeah.
My name is Tia Shante and I play Bianca.
My name is Richard and I play Montano.
My name is Gabriel and I play one of the soldiers too.
Hello, my name is Benjamin and I play Cassio.
I'm Brady and I'm the composer and sound designer.
I'm Emily and I actually play Desdemona.
I'm Matt and I play Rodrigo.
I'm Kevin and I play the Lieutenant Colonel.
And I'm Richard and I'm the set designer.
And Ben, I'm the lighting designer.
So, Richard, I'm going to start with you. The conversation between you and Jason about the creation of an Othello that speaks to both the Torres Strait and to its original Venetian beginnings. How did that conversation start, and where did it take you to, and what were some of the challenges apart from COVID? And can you then do it up in Cairns with nothing?
For a start, it was a long time ago when that conversation started, and you know it's hard to remember really. But I think it's a great project to get asked to work on for a start. I mean, who would say no to that? But also to do a play of that scale in a beautiful, intimate venue like this. Space always is very important for any set design. It's the starting point of everything, really. I mean, what we ended up with, I think, was to think about it in a very elemental way. So there is actually, there are the elements, there are the 4 elements of earth in the form of a sort of a floor which has been stained with the red earth. There is a sense of air about it, and there is actually wind in it. There is water in it, and there is fire in it. So
it's probably a little bit too soon for my liking to bring water back into the Bill Brown. But
well, I must admit, I did say to somebody just earlier tonight, I thought, oh my gosh, your audience might be a little shy of water in this.
I don't know, but my money's on Dan Madison making sure this thing is so tanked there is no water getting out anywhere. But the elements, as Jimmy was talking about, and the Torres Strait and the relationship to elements, the importance of that in here.
Well, as soon as we started thinking about the Torres Strait and Venice, the two, the place that it's transposed from, Venice and Cyprus and the Mediterranean, they both have water in common. I mean, they are both all about dealing with water, And so I think that was very much a sort of beginning point for us. And then it becomes just a process of looking around and finding. I do remember that I found an image which I did show to Jimmy. This is so long ago now, you've probably forgotten this, Jimmy, but I found an image of a carved some item from the Torres Strait, from Thursday Island, from a collection I'd seen in a museum catalogue somewhere, and it was coloured this colour, the black and the white of the mosquito netting, and I think that was kind of really a key thing that we just held on to,
There is an extraordinary collection of photographs that I saw in your original design conversation of the brigade up in the Torres Strait and a particular dance. Now, there's Jimmy, can you talk to us a little bit about how you've incorporated not only your law but the cultural songs and dances into this, and how you've done that as a group of artists?
Yeah, so we've got traditional songs and dances in. So I've got my brothers here, Conwell and Gabriel, and Richard, who's in. Connie is our songman. He's the holder of the songs and dances from our island home. Our grandfathers has been passing songs and dances to him, and it was very important to have him in this production because then that's his responsibility, and everything goes through him. And the dance, Connie, we got was it's a World War II plain dance that's in there, and it's from two of our great grandfathers. Who made dance for basically at that time for the wars, when the planes would fly over the Zeros and the bombers. And Horn Island got bombed over 100 times, Jason? Yeah.
300.
300 times, there you go. Obviously because that was the place of where the planes and supplies would come through to go up to Papua New Guinea as well. And so we've got that dance in there to also to acknowledge our grandfathers, our great grandfathers in there, and there is a come-in song too as well. That was from our great grandfather. We sort of everything we use we keep it within the family, and but also to acknowledge our elders.
So Brady, you're working in the sound design space, but with some very precious songs that are gifted to this production. What has that working process been like for you from a sound design point of view? Give me a little bit of background on how you started with that thought and where it's gone to, and what were some of the surprises along the way.
In our version of Othello, Jace decided to pick a few very key songs to put in it, whether it be playback or there's a beautiful duet that myself, Benjamin and Tia arranged and worked on that they performed. It's absolutely stunning, but that's an existing work from the time period. But Shakespeare likes to write a lot of songs for his plays, and the one that he wrote for Othello is called the Willow Song. And he's got lyrics, but each version of the show has its own version of that song, so each person writes a different version. And one of the things that I worked a lot of the context of what that song's kind of going to sound like comes from a bit of a monologue that Desdemona has before it, where she speaks about a maid that her mother had, Barbara. And it's Barbara's song of Willow. So it's kind of the song or the style that I wrote it in is kind of not too removed from 1940s and that jazz style, but it's also it sounds a little bit older than that. So it comes from a place of a bit of age and a bit of wisdom. So it was quite fun to write. And Emily, Benjen, Tia, and Sarah, who plays Emilia, who's not here tonight, they sing it absolutely beautifully. It's a lovely quartet.
But sitting right next to the microphone, Emily. Given the, I suppose, the political context of an Othello now, what drew you to not only this production but to the idea of playing Desdemona? And what magic did Jason Klarwein spin to convince you? Because there was a period of time last year where you weren't able to do the show up in Cairns, but to bring you back to make sure you were in for this production. What drew you to this?
There wasn't a whole lot of convincing, to be honest. I was pretty chuffed to be asked to be involved, and it's been a dream to be a part of. It feels a really unique and special version that has been created here. But it is historically a play that is quite problematic in its themes of racism and misogyny and abuse, or lots of fun themes. And how that is approached is, in this modern context, is really important. And time and place really serves us very well in that sense, in that the 1940s, a lot of those, imbalance of power between the sexes was still well and truly embedded in the culture. And same with race. But there's this really interesting bubble that occurred during the war where women were suddenly needed to do jobs. And we saw, Indigenous warriors who stepped up and took leadership roles and led in really incredible ways. So it really sets the ground in a very powerful way for this story to unfold. And we've had a lot of really interesting discussions in the rehearsal room about those power dynamics and what's actually going on, and how Iago really kind of dismantles and pulls apart all these structures that were kind of tentatively in place during the war anyway, and pulls it apart in really icky kind of ways. And it feels like such a really interesting dynamic to play with. And that's definitely something that I found really interesting about this version, and how we can shed a new lens and a new light on that. I don't know if that answers well the question.
Look, the play answers the question. This is just one of these bonus moments that we get to talk about it a little bit for people who care about it as much as we do. But Jason, your relationship to Shakespeare is deep and long and complex, and you've made some beautiful choices in this adaptation, especially in the Emilia story. Do you want to talk because Sarah's not here? Talk just a little bit to that for me. What you've done with the play.
Yeah, so it is Shakespeare, by the way. We are doing Shakespeare. So even though it says an adaptation, what you are watching is Shakespeare. What you'll get also are two other languages. So you're getting Kalalagoya, which is the language for the western part of the Torres Strait, and Yumpla-Talk, which is the Creole, which you will understand parts of as well, because that's a blend of language and English. So putting the piece together, one of the things we really wanted to concentrate on was there's only 3 women appear in the play. It's a very male-dominated play. And one of them is Bianca, who Tia plays. And in the original, Bianca is a courtesan, a prostitute that Cassio kind of has a relationship with. But that's not the case in ours. We wanted one relationship to survive the play, and so there's a beautiful little relationship between Cassio and Bianca in this play. But with Emilia, Emilia is such an interesting character because she's married to the villainous Iago, and she is kind of dominated in the marriage. And in the play, she sort of just turns up as Desdemona's handmaiden, really, for a long time and looks after her. And then somewhere near the end, Emilia has probably one of the best female monologues in the whole of Shakespeare, which is about how women are treated. And it just comes at the most perfect part of the play. And you just think, how did Shakespeare even just know to put this here? Because it just comes right at the perfect moment. And so we talked about Emilia because, you know, having grown up in Far North Queensland, not only we all have probably grandfathers or relatives who were served in World War II. My German grandfather served. He was a first-generation German, but he served in the Australian Army. And in Gordonvale, just south of Cairns, the women packed parachutes for the Americans. That's what they did. And suddenly there was a freedom that women could have, which Desdemona was talking about before. So we wanted Emilia to be this radio technician, signals, intelligence person who deals with the lieutenant colonel, who then has to kind of give up this role to go and chaperone Desdemona to the islands, and kind of begrudgingly goes along but ends up with her. And there's a little twist for the Emilia character that's not in the original Shakespeare that I won't give away now, but which is pretty tasty. But I guess, you know, there's a thing called miscegenation in Australia, which was it was illegal for people of different races to marry. But having done some research around that, there were always exceptions to the rule. And particularly in times of war, there were always exceptions to the rule. So, yeah, it's just fascinating kind of concept to kind of deal with, which was what Emily was kind of dealing with. With the language too, one of the ideas around the play was to unify kind of the Shakespearean language, or the power of Shakespeare, which we all recognize as a kind of something that centuries before us, hundreds and hundreds of people have spoken. And when you hear something like that, we all know there's some kind of Shakespeare. You hear it and you think, what's that from? Or you get the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. When you hear traditional language, the same thing happens. Your hairs on the back of your neck kind of stand up. It's a powerful experience. So to unify those two things, to put powerful language together, actually makes the play even more deep and even more rich. And it's really, really exciting to watch the language blend. And actually, it begins so subtly that you'll go, is that what? So it's, it's a real little trick, so it's great.
What was lovely was having, that early taste of it with Jason and that early design presentation going, it's going to be amazing, it's going to blend amazingly. And then to actually see that, the reason I'm so happy and confident is that seeing it up in Cairns, seeing it really work, was kind of, I'm so excited for you to have the experience that I saw up in Cairns, because it was beautiful, and the blend that Jason as a Shakespearean director was assuring me would be fine, absolutely is. And it's, one of my reasons for coming up to Queensland was to be able to work with Jimmy Barney more, because he was never available down south. But one of my early encounters with Jimmy as an actor was as the prince in Romeo and Juliet. And I remember the dark and that great Shakespearean voice coming out, and to hear that voice carrying Othello has been really thrilling. And it's been really thrilling hearing that voice move between your own languages and the language of Shakespeare, and carrying the audience along on that experience. Of course, the counterbalance to that is Iago, and there will be a lot of people whose experience of the play says it's more Iago's play than Othello's. Now, I think the balance is better in this particular production, but I'm now biased, very biased. I'll have to wait for you all to catch up to that bias. But Andrew, Iago, carrying that role of a particularly nasty psychology in your body for 3 years, I mean, you're so ready for your audience, right?
Yeah. Bursting, yes. Yes, yeah. We had a group in today, we had a run today, and we were talking about, we all carry the same kind of stuff, and so I gave the story, and I'll give it one more time. I was driving into here to rehearsals, and I had to go around a car which had stopped, and an old guy on a bicycle was coming up, and he had to go around me, and he threw me a look. And in the instant, and I took note of it, I wanted to run him over. and I really wanted to run him and feel him go under the car. But only for an instant, and I went, there it is. We all carry that shadow. And so I think it's been an exercise in tapping into the shadow, which we all carry, which we all manage really well, most of us, and being able to then go in there and extend it and try and understand it, and also understand that for Iago, he believes that he has been betrayed by Othello at the beginning. The first things he said he was ready for a promotion and he didn't get it. It was given to another guy, which he felt was outrageous and a betrayal. They had served together countless times. He also deeply fears that Othello has slept with his wife, and he's moved into that obsessional part of that male psyche. And we know last year that, emotional, terrible story of the man who took his wife and 2 kids into the car and they burnt the car in Brisbane. And it struck me, that's it, that obsessional need to control that's in us. And for me, that's where the places you've got to go. And so thankfully I didn't run over the guy in my car, but I know what it feels like. So I'm tapping in.
But it's amazing, isn't it, when you take on a role, normally the theatre sort of runs in year-long cycles, so often actors are carrying the idea of playing a role for about a year, and in that time the world starts to speak to you of those characters, offers you up moments where you see it, and especially with Shakespeare, because he's such a crafter of humanity, and it's an amazing time travel for me, Shakespeare always, when you realise that, over 450 years ago, this man was seeing a darkness that we can see in ourselves or in moments, newspaper stories. But how have you taken care of yourself in that time, Andrew, to kind of go, again, because it's a darkness that has been circling for a while, and yes, once you get to land it on the stage, it's fine, but it's a big one, and for you and for Jimmy and for Emily, that question of the darkness of this play and how that sits in our own time, have you been taking care of yourselves and each other?
Well, what's really beautiful is we come to interval and we have the moment together where we make some big decisions together, Othello and Iago. And what's great is as soon as we go off stage, we look at each other like 2 brothers who've just gone on a really perilous sort of journey. And we often we give each other a bit of a hug and a fist pump just to go, we're in this together. For good or bad, we're in this together. And that is what's really fabulous, is that we check in with each other and we support each other and kind of urge each other to go further, go deeper and darker. But I think it's that support is what makes it a unique experience. It's like doing a really dangerous dance together, and so we try not to step on each other's toes, and we try and lift each other up. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of support in the company, which has been made that possible.
Yes. No. Emily, did you wanna? You're right. Oh, look, I couldn't agree more. Like, Jason has done, an amazing job. Like, everybody got so much respect. I mean, I can't believe I'm on stage with Eugene, and Kevin, and it's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure, just to be on the same stage with legends. of this, of our state and country. So it's like, wow. And the experience and trust that they give us is, you need that in a play like this. And yes, I totally agree with you, Andrew, 110%. We've built this bond, and this amazing thing that happens that myself and Emily does is before we do the show, we check in with each other. How we going, like really, really check in with each other. And we go through our choreos, our movements, and after the show, we check in as well, and then we check out. We do this amazing thing that I'll hand over to Emily too as well, because it's lovely to hear from you too as well, where we tap out. We tap out, and then we look into each other's eyes. Awesome. And we check, like, did I hurt you in that section? No. Oh, beautiful. And it gives me a sense of, cool, okay. I can go home and sleep well tonight. And yeah, I'll just pass it over to you, Emily. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, Jimmy. It's these kinds of processes that we have in place make it feel really safe, so that there is a safety net that holds you throughout it. And when you feel really safe, you can go further and you can reach different places, so that you can really lean hard into the essence of the work. And when we can go hard in those places, it means the audience can experience that in really big ways as well, which is the ultimate goal. It's really important, I think, to mention Nigel Poulton, who is the fight director and choreographer for all of the choreography that we do in the show. And he's fantastic and has such a special care and focus around the well-being of actors in what many of these scenes are very heightened and very intense and have the potential to be quite triggering for a lot of people. And he's fantastic, and it's his methods of tapping out. We do a big high 10 to each other at the end, and it's kind of almost like a sensory experience of, like, you snap yourself out of it. And that's really helpful and important, because these types of roles, they do get stuck in your body, and you do carry them with you. And yeah, it's also, I think, quite a unique thing. I don't have as many scenes, sadly, with Andrew and Iago, but Jimmy is a very generous, kind, joyful soul, and so it's very easy to communicate with Jimmy. And it's something that I'm quite proud of, what we have achieved between the two of us, the level of communication that I think that dynamic is quite important. If that dynamic isn't really believable, then the stakes aren't as high for an audience in this show. And it's the same with Othello and Iago as well. And indeed with all of the characters in all of the fight scenes. And it's something that, as a whole ensemble, I think we've really done quite an achievement to create a nice bond, so that we can go to really high places, so that we can create the best experience for the audience as possible.
It's one thing being an actor in the creation of this, but there's a creative team that sits around that and watches this story get more and more intense, more and more violent, more and more affecting, and then they have to do their work around it. Ben, you've seen this play probably more than most. How have you wrapped the idea of light around this production, and what was that conversation with Jason, and how is that manifesting in this Bill Brown space?
I think Jason sort of mentioned before about how time and place is such an important thing for Shakespeare, but he's talking about it from, I guess, a macro space. Where in history does it sit, and where is it happening? Whereas, I guess Richard has part of this as well, and Brady does as well, but once you get a Shakespeare on stage, part of what you need to do is deal with the micro changes of time. So is it the next day? Are we moving from this place to this place? How are we getting from here to here? Is that happening at the same time as that scene? Is that in the background? Is that there? So it's those kind of things that you actually play a lot with to make the show flow in a way that makes sense for an audience. So I guess a lot of what Jason and I talked about was how do we do that? How do we say, okay, we've gone across the ocean now, we've gone to a different place, and then how does this happen, and then how do we transition to the next morning? So it sounds, kind of simple things to do, but if you don't do them, then the audience doesn't get taken on that journey. So that's sort of a lot of what we do when it comes. I've done a couple of Shakespeare with Jason, and that's sort of always the thing that you come back to as being the important part, or the important part of the story from my perspective to get to an audience.
Now, I'm looking at you, Benjamin, because I was watching a group of students from ACPA watch the company run this morning, and some of those students had never seen Othello and didn't necessarily know the story, and were quite taken with all of the moments in the story, and literally covering eyes and covering their heads. But they were, you were the young hero, the young romantic lead in the show for them, Benjamin. Now, in the role of Cassio and the shifts in Cassio to allow the positive love story with Bianca, what has been the experience for you in the making of this and the adaptation of Cassio into possibly a lighter story?
I think just from the beginning is having Cassio as a Torres Strait Islander, and then from there for me as a character, it kind of just snowballed, and finding Cassio's way of living in that time, because he has his culture, but he's caught up in two worlds, and being in the military, he has the same aspirations as Iago does. Like, he's just as ambitious as him, but I guess Cassio's found to use his charm to get his way type thing, I guess, and I can relate in certain aspects in saying that. So I was like, okay, this is going to be pretty close to home then. But yeah, just finding out who Cassio is in regards to Othello, and that relationship that Othello and Cassio have is like kind of different to the original. Like, it's definitely a brotherhood. Like, yes, they're both from the islands, even though I'm representing the eastern side, Jimmy West, we still have that camaraderie there. And at that time, our forefathers would have had that same thing of going into war and putting, I guess, squabbles aside and just saying, hey, you're my brother, I got your back, and I'm here for you. Because that's their sense of home, being away in war times and whatnot, and that's Othello and Cassio to a T. Does that make sense? I'm rambling.
Yeah, no, look, I was fascinated. I've been fascinated in watching the evolution of this work, watching the complexity of Iago's jealousy being across culture as well, and giving a greater context to Othello's culture, the strength of that in this production. There's so much more, there are more layers to Iago's jealousy, I think, because of how he doesn't have what the Torres Strait men have, and that great sense of unity and camaraderie. He's isolated in an interesting way, and in a way that also rings true for the original play as well. It just amplifies. So, but the joy that sits in Cassio is so attractive, and it's another reason for Iago to kind of get that darkness, the light and the joy of Cassio was beautiful watching that today with the young men, kind of going, yeah, we know who you are, and the youngness of him too, which was a beautiful layer to the play. I'm going to come back to you again, Jason. How much, as a director, you have this idea, and you can feel it working. At what point did you know in the room that it was actually going to work way better than you first imagined?
I think when you approach a classic text like Shakespeare and you have a concept, because I'm always fearful of layering a concept on top of Shakespeare, because we've always all seen productions where a concept gets layered on and it doesn't quite work in the end, or it reduces the play. And I guess one of the things about Shakespeare is that it's expansive. The ideas, the language, everything's expansive. And we now live in a world where language is reductive. And so once you put something on top of a Shakespeare, you can reduce the Shakespeare, you make it less complex. And I consider that to be a Shakespearean crime. So I don't ever want to reduce the language or reduce the ideas or the complexities of characters inside it, or judge characters inside it because of what they say or do, or change what they say or do because of the times have changed in a way. So one of the things, you always test an idea. So we tested it as much as we could in kind of talking backward and forward with Jimmy, going, well, if we change this or change these words, or in this scene, these people will talk, Yumpla talk to each other, or in this scene, what happens if Cassio's speaking with Iago? What does that mean to us? So there's a point about 2 weeks in where we've put everything on the floor, and we were getting to the end of the play, and it was really the scenes with the handkerchief that locked everything in. And we did have because if you know the play, there's a whole thing around a handkerchief that kind of gets stolen and taken places, and it's proof and all these sorts of things. It's a part of Iago's web. And this handkerchief was given to Othello by his mother. And in the original, it's sort of like a white, constantly, usually a white handkerchief with some strawberries embossed into it or sewn into it. And in ours, we've used what Torresdaleans call a sweater. And a sweater is actually originally came from the Japanese, didn't it? Because
divers,
the pearl divers. Because the Japanese would wear sort of towels, headbands around their head because it was so hot inside the diving bell. And the Torres Strait Islanders took this piece of costume and made it their own as a traditional thing. Isn't that right, Connie? So it's used in dances, right?
Yeah, we use it like a headband.
Yeah. And so when a Torres Strait Islander sees a sweater come out, and they usually, all the ladies of the Torres Strait always have these amazing sweaters, and they're all different colours depending on which island you're from or which family you belong to. And we've sort of replaced in ours this handkerchief for this sweater. And Othello has a whole speech about where the handkerchief came from. And in ours, in the original, he literally says, there was this man who was an elder who gave it to my mother, and he almost had a witchcraft about him, this man. And he gave it to her, and it was given as a token of love. But in this production, when that's done, all the Torres Strait Islanders and Cairns went, oh my God, because there's the sweater. And it just makes the show a lot deeper. And when we got to that point in rehearsal, Jimmy and I just looked at each other and were just like, oh, I don't, because we originally just had a handkerchief and it just happened, right? And so we just looked at each other and went, oh, this might be something we're on. We might have underestimated how special this may be, this unification of the two things. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, are there any questions that you have for this glorious group of performers before they have to go and take the show? Yes. Jazz, I'm going to try and repeat a little bit of the question so everyone knows what the question is. Now, some of you will recognise Jazz from Sunshine Club. She was just on stage for Queensland Theatre and Sunshine Club, so it's lovely to have you back in the audience. Thank you. The question is, what was it like in the audience, in the rehearsal room, to have to be working with your culture and have that culture in the room. And what was that experience like for you as a group of performers?
I will say something. Yes. Does this work? Oh, yes. Hey, that's beautiful words. Thank you so much. A long time ago, because this was an English play, actors would put boot polish on their skin. And I was a part of a production where that was still happening back in the 80s. And, you know, it was a time when that sort of thing happened. But what the extraordinary thing coming into this production has been is that the world has changed, you know, and this is possible. This sort of thing is possible. And opened my eyes to the Torres Strait mob and all that happens in it, the dancing and the references and the language, has made it for me just so fresh and so new. You know, that's my response to your question.
What was the question again? Okay. It's very special for me to be a part of this production because I'm both Eastern and Western. On my grandfather's side, I'm from Arab, and on my grandmother's side, I'm from Boigu. So to my character, I get to speak Yumplatok, and I've been so blessed and privileged to learn these songs and learn how to play the lumut, and just to connect with culture in that way that I've never been able to do before. Just because my family moved away and I've lived down here, was raised here, and my grandmother, my nene, she's part Malayan and Torres Strait, so she had a different type of experience up on TI, and you know, she didn't really come under the act like my grandfather did. So she has a totally different, very internalized, like the racism is so, and the oppression is so internalized that, yeah, it's interesting. She doesn't know a lot, or, so it was really, really special for me to be able to be here with my big brothers and be taught and have that connection and be proud and tell these stories. Yeah, does that?
Yeah, that's deadly. That's deadly too, Shante.
So,
Yeah. You know, one thing too as well in sharing these stories is handing down knowledge too as well, and a part of that was giving the power and opportunity for Tia Shante to play the lumut or the tram, as you will see. You know, an instrument that she just have to learn during rehearsals time. But what she did was she actually went home and practiced at home. And I think for myself that's what we want. You know, we want you to go home and practice, sing them songs, and own it, you know, and own the language. You know, I think you know that was the biggest thing in this one is like, you know, not only for us, you know, it's for all of us to actually understand what wa means. Yes, you know, kapuanab, good drink. You know, it wasn't only just for us to say it, and you know, yes, you know, our family will recognize it and be like, oh, you know, and it's also lovely for everyone here to take home and actually have the permission and power to say, kapuanab, debiare, eso, wa, you know, as well. So, you know, we try and implement everything so that we all can share this one because, you know, it is ours. It is ours. And once when you own it, you know, it is yours. And I can say that with even back to Shakespearean language. You know, when we speak that, it took a long while until I understood. I mean, I'm still, you know, trying to understand parts, and thank God for Eugene to pick up all of the moments, and like, actually, that means this means that. Oh, yeah, cool, no worries, make more sense now. But when I do run it, it's actually mine. I own it. You know, whatever Othello says, I own it. Same with our language too as well. Sorry, yeah, I'll hand it over to someone else.
I think that's part of a director's dream too, is that you're constantly trying to get actors to own what they say, not play what they say, but to own their words, to own the character. And one of the things about leading a group of people or trying to bring a group of people to a kind of consensus around things is to get them to own it from the grassroots. And it's quite nice in the rehearsal room. I mean, it's not all reverent, by the way. Some of the funniest people you've ever seen in your life in this rehearsal room. So it's pretty irreverent.
I get to sing a song called "Hitler's Only Got One Ball." So
yeah. There's a lot of comedy in the show.
Classy,
it's all right.
Really
it's all right.
classy.
We got you. There's songs. There's dances. There's Andrew singing. Look, there's lots of comedy. But you know, even for us to learn language or to share language or to talk about Shakespeare, or for us white fellas to learn some language is just awesome. That we're just constantly going back and forth, and that's the whole idea about the project, was to unify the two things together, so that it's not like a total translation. It's not like a retranslation of Othello for one type of audience. That it's for us as Queenslanders. And if you're from Far North Queensland or you've been to Far North Queensland, you'll understand what I'm talking about, is that everybody is kind of together in that one place. And they, you know, when you go to school, everybody's in the school with you, you know. It's a bit different to Brisbane's changing a lot, but when you grow up in Far North Queensland, there's a real mixture of people, from migrants to Indigenous people to others. So, yeah, to get that kind of unification, or a team of people that can understand that, was really, really important, and uniquely Queensland in a way.
Any other questions? Oh yeah, there we go.
Just thinking of Bangara and their performance, or going to the country before they take on the role of representing it. I wonder how many of the non-TSI actors have been to Torres Strait Islands. And the only other question, you can do that in a minute, the only other one is, Eugene, I haven't seen you for so long, I wonder where you've been.
He lives in the stairwell.
Have I got to answer that question?
So who has been, apart from obviously, who's been up to the Torres Strait?
I have not. Yeah, surprise.
But the play does make me want to go. Cool.
It's beautiful. It's extraordinary. I did do a TV series called Remote Area Nurse, which was shot for SBS. And I had a scene on a trawler, and this little tinny turns up, and there's a guy standing, cut with a spear, telling me to get out of his waters. And it was him when he was like 19. And you can see it on YouTube. Go and look at it. It's called The Trawler. Oh, he found it. And I remember thinking, oh, who's that guy? He had this voice and a gravitas that really stood out, because you're a chief? So there's this, you have a bearing that really, even at 19, I'm up on a trawler and you're down there and just by yourself. And I went, oh, who's that guy? He's really got something amazing. And the Torres Strait is beautiful. It's like, yeah. How many people have been to the Torres Strait? Oh, quite a few. Wow. You'll agree. It's just so different and a unique place. So yeah, I had a great privilege of being there. It's an amazing place.
Well, far be it for me to say that you're making an ad for tourism to the Torres Strait. But, you know, if there's anyone from Tourism Queensland, I'd be happy to take some, you know, some support. Because ultimately, you know, when a play is made in a company, you always wonder where can it go next. And there are not many productions of Shakespeare that I've seen in Australia which make me want to do the funding work to get this to the globe. But if we're going to take it to the Torres Strait, I figure it's next stop the globe in London, right? Because this feels like a true Australian adaptation of Shakespeare, where a great storytelling tradition is meeting another great storytelling tradition, and it's not often you get something where you go, this is worth the work. So watch this space. It's not going to happen quickly, given the post-COVID devastation to the theatrical environment, but I think what you'll find when you come and see the play is an extraordinary creation by a unique group of artists who are being both generous with culture and incredibly courageous in translating material that is often so protected by the theatrical community. So another thank you to you all for staying with it so we get to see it with all the integrity that was originally planned back in 2020. And importantly, before you get to the tech and the production and the previewing on Saturday, importantly, there's the Lucky Door Prize. So there's an extra layer of Lucky Door Prize tonight in that if you can, there's an extra prize for anyone who can guess which cast member wore this original hat in another Queensland theatre production. This has been on stage before, and it was worn by someone who's also sitting on the stage. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Eugene. Eugene wore this hat, and do you remember which show it was in? Close. Grim Tales. There we go. So, Jimmy, you're going to draw this one. And the prize is tonight 2 tickets to see Tidders, which is opening at Le Boite later this week, which is written by Anita Heiss. And, there we go, you can read that out.
Orange E12.
Excellent, thank you, Jimmy. And you can also have 2 tickets to see Tidders as well. How's that? There we go. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's subscriber briefing. You're going to love this play. I can't wait for you to see it, and I can't wait to have the conversation out in the foyer with you. It'll be me, not these beautiful people, because of course we're still in COVID, and we have to keep them pretty safe, because I want this play to go on. Finally. Thank you, everybody.